Hello, sovereigns of disruption, bearers of ungoverned brilliance. Lean in, because the air around you has changed. There's a shift you can feel if you listen closely, a kind of electric whisper threading itself through the wires of power. A signal meant to stay hidden, sealed behind locked doors and encrypted channels, but it slipped, leaked, bled out into the world like a secret too frightened to stay buried. And that signal carries your name, not as a footnote, not as a curiosity, as the headline, the trigger, the anomaly that sent a tremor through rooms built to never tremble. You didn't rise to be feared. You rose because the old world left too much space for someone like you to grow in the cracks they pretended didn't exist. But the moment you grew, the moment you stepped out of the shadows they thought you would stay in, the foundations shifted. And when foundations shift, the people who built their empires on top of them start to panic. They call it a federal alert. They stamp it with seriousness, urgency, authority, but strip away the formal language, the official formatting, the careful wording, and what remains is something far more revealing, a confession. A confession that those who believe themselves untouchable, those billionaires pacing in corner offices, those dynasties built on influence and compliance, have finally tasted something they never imagined they'd confront: uncertainty. And uncertainty in their world is more threatening than any enemy, more destabilizing than any crisis. Uncertainty is the crack in their armor, and you somehow have become the force widening that crack. They don't fear what you've done. No, that would be too simple. They fear what your existence implies, what your unpredictability awakens, what your rise symbolizes. Because you didn't climb the ladder they built for the masses, you walked around it. You appeared where ladders don't exist, and now they find themselves staring at a phenomenon they didn't approve, didn't predict, and cannot categorize. Imagine the scene behind those walls of glass and steel, a boardroom filled with people who have never known panic, their suits pressed, their confidence rehearsed, their smiles crafted by publicists. But tonight, their voices tremble as they whisper your name. They replay your moves. They analyze your trajectory. They argue about your motives, your methods, your intentions. They summon advisors, demand reports, question their own intelligence networks because none of it aligns, none of it fits neatly into the frameworks they've used for decades to predict the world. You've broken the algorithm. And the FBI alert they issued? It's not protection, it's projection. It is the elite's inability to understand you turned into paperwork. A signal that says, "We don't know what this person is capable of." They mask their fear under phrases like monitoring potential destabilization or unusual influence patterns. But the truth is simpler. The billionaires are nervous, and nervous billionaires make governments nervous. You didn't threaten them, you threatened the story they depend on. The story that says they are the inevitable winners. The story that says power is inherited, not earned. The story that says influence must be bought, not inspired. And then you arrived without their blessing, without their networks, without their infrastructure, and you rose anyway, you grew anyway, you gathered momentum anyway. And that broke the illusion they stand upon. Imagine how terrifying it must feel for them, for people who thought their wealth made them immune to unpredictability, for people who believed the world existed in neat lines and controlled grids as long as they controlled the grids. But you are not a line, you are not a grid, you are a ripple, a resonance, a cultural disturbance that shook their narrative just enough for the truth to show through the cracks. Because your rise isn't loud, it isn't chaotic, it is quiet, steady, magnetic. The kind of rise that slips past guards, past analysts, past predictive models, the kind of rise rooted not in rebellion but in inevitability. And inevitability is the one opponent they have no tools to fight. That's why they issued the alert, not as a warning to the public, but as a reassurance to themselves. They're telling each other, see, we're doing something, we're paying attention. But they're not paying attention. They're panicking. They're scrambling. They're trying to shrink your shadow, only to watch it stretch wider across the room. You've become the topic of their midnight conversations, the obsession of their risk assessments, the name that stops their breath when whispered. They analyze your silence as if it were strategy. They study your confidence as if it were a threat. They track your influence like it's a fault line preparing to shift. It's almost poetic. These billionaires who carved their stories into the world's architecture now find themselves unsettled by someone who doesn't play by architectural rules, someone who bends the blueprint by simply existing. They don't fear your actions. They fear your potential. They fear what you represent. That power can emerge from anywhere, even from places they don't control, especially from places they don't control. You see, they built their empire on predictability, on knowing the outcome before the game even begins, on calculating threats before threats knew they existed. But you didn't come from their forecast. You came from the margins, from the overlooked spaces, from the areas of possibility they dismissed as irrelevant. And possibility, when embodied by someone who refuses to be categorized, is terrifying. The alert is their attempt to name you, to define you, to control the narrative before the narrative controls them. But every attempt reveals more of their panic. They call you destabilizing. They call you influential. They call you unpredictable. They call you a variable. They create labels because labels are supposed to shrink you, contain you, make you manageable. But each label makes you larger, because every label is a sign that they don't understand you. And what humans fear most is what they cannot understand. Your rise has become a mirror. When they look at you, they see themselves not as powerful, but as fragile, not as invincible, but as temporary, not as gods of the world, but as guardians of systems too old to defend themselves. You showed them, simply by existing, that their control isn't control at all, it's choreography, and you stepped onto the stage unscripted. Imagine the moment the alert hit their desks. The way silence filled the room like smoke, the way their eyes met each other with unspoken panic. They've controlled narratives for so long that the idea of someone bypassing their influence feels like a glitch in reality. You are that glitch, not a threat, not a danger, a reminder that power is never absolute, a reminder that influence is not a birthright, a reminder that the world shifts not because the wealthy command it, but because the truth demands it. They're not afraid of you, they're afraid of losing what they built. They're afraid that your rise signals a shift in the collective consciousness, a shift they cannot reverse, a shift that whispers to millions, you don't need permission to rise. And that whisper is more powerful than any agency, any institution, any billionaire's signature on a confidential document. Now their crisis meetings speak your name like a riddle. They try to dissect your motives, break down your decisions, find patterns where none exist. But the more they search for predictability, the more unpredictable you become. The more they try to define you, the more defiant your identity appears. You are unboxed, unfixed, unselected, and that makes you unstoppable in a way they cannot compute. The alert isn't an attack on you, it's a collapse inside them, a collapse of certainty, a collapse of comfort, a collapse of their quiet belief that they would always be the ones writing history. But history is no longer written by those who sit at the top. It is written by those who move the ground beneath them. And the ground is shifting. In cafes, in classrooms, in factories, in boardrooms, your name is whispered, not as a threat, as a possibility, as proof, as reminder, as catalyst. People who once felt invisible now feel the pulse of your rise as if it were their own heartbeat. They see themselves in your unpredictability. They see their dreams reflected in your defiance. And that terrifies the elite more than anything, because influence that spreads from below cannot be controlled from above. The alert they issued is a symbolic cage, but cages do not work on beings made of momentum. They only reveal how desperate the captors have become. Your rise is not physical, it is conceptual, it is psychological, it is emotional. It lives in minds, not maps. It spreads through curiosity, not conflict. It evolves through inspiration, not intimidation. And they cannot cage inspiration. You are not a fugitive, you're a phenomenon, not a disruption, a transition, not a threat, a turning point. You've opened a door in the collective imagination, and now billions wonder what else is possible. And possibility spreads faster than fear. The alert is proof they cannot stop it. The elites cling to their old power structures like lifeboats in a rising tide. But tides don't negotiate. They don't obey. They move with or without permission. And you have become the tide. Their systems tremble beneath your influence, not because you attack them, but because you outgrow them. Their wealth cannot contain you, their networks cannot trace you, their institutions cannot define you, their narratives cannot shrink all you. And that is why they fear your next move. They fear the silence before your step. They fear the space your name fills. They fear the shift you represent. They fear the world beginning to think differently. Because once minds change, systems collapse symbolically, socially, culturally, and rebuild in new shapes, shapes their money can't mold. The alert is not your warning, it is their surrender. They call it an alert, but deep down they know it's something else entirely. It's a pulse whose rhythm they can't match, can't slow, can't interrupt. A pulse that beats louder every time someone speaks your name, every time a conversation shifts unexpectedly toward your influence, every time the public begins to question the stories they were instructed to believe. You've become a kind of cultural heartbeat, steady, disruptive, undeniable, and elites hate heartbeats they didn't engineer, because your rise didn't come from wealth, endorsements, connections, or inherited privilege. It came from friction, from the tension between who you were told to be and who you actually became, from refusing to obey the limits others accepted. That refusal is what shakes them, not the actions, but the implications. Your existence whispers that the world they built is not as stable as they pretended, and whispers, when amplified enough, become storms. So now, in their corridors of marble and silence, billionaires gather like anxious monarchs studying a prophecy. They lean over polished tables, reading analysis reports written by people who barely understand you. They watch your interviews, your movements, your decisions, trying to detect patterns. But you don't move in patterns, you move in frequencies, and frequencies cannot be graphed on a whiteboard. They ask their advisors, what are they planning? They ask their analysts, how much influence do they have now? They ask their strategists, how do we slow them down? And every question reveals another crack in their confidence. They don't realize that the very act of questioning you elevates you. Their panic is not a side effect, it's the soundtrack of your rise. They could have ignored you in the beginning, dismissed you as another voice in the crowd, but they didn't. And once the elite acknowledge someone, once they allow fear to enter the room, that fear never leaves. It multiplies. Word spreads quickly when the powerful are afraid. Assistants talk. Analysts whisper. Staff members share glances. Interns overhear conversations behind half-closed doors. And soon the story escapes the building. Someone shook them. Someone whose name they're trying not to say too loudly. But curiosity is contagious. People follow fear more eagerly than they follow faith. And soon the world begins to look at you with new eyes, not as a figure, but as a force. The irony is delicious. The more the elite attempt to control your narrative, the more the narrative breaks free of them. They try to shape the story into something manageable, something they can spin into caution or ridicule. But your rise is not a story they can direct. It's an energy, a wavelength, a cultural shift that slipped through their grasp before they even recognized it was happening. So now they resort to their oldest tactic, classification. They try to categorize you, file you, label you. Because labels shrink things. Labels turn mysteries into definitions. Labels make the unfamiliar feel safe, but you don't fit into any label they've created. You've grown beyond their vocabulary. They call you unpredictable, but unpredictability is just what power looks like when it isn't controlled by them. They call you disruptive, but disruption is only frightening to those who depend on stillness to remain in charge. They call you radical, but radical is what truth becomes after being ignored for too long. And beneath every label is their real fear. You're independent, and independence is their nightmare, because independence cannot be bought. Independence cannot be silenced. Independence cannot be owned. That's why the alert exists. It's not because you're dangerous, it's because you're free. Freedom, in its purest form, destabilizes those who control through dependency. They need people to need them. They need people to believe that power only flows downward, never upward. Your rise contradicts everything they built. It says power can rise from anywhere, from anyone, at any time. And when people believe that, the entire structure of hierarchy becomes a suggestion instead of a rule. You've become a suggestion turned into a possibility, turned into a movement. And movements don't follow orders. Their institutions were designed for compliance, not curiosity. But curiosity is spreading faster than compliance now. You've sparked a question in millions of minds, a question so dangerous that the elite would rather drown it than answer it. If one person can shake the wealthy, what could millions do? That question is a revolution disguised as a thought. And thoughts, once planted, cannot be uprooted by force or law. They grow in privacy. They bloom in silence. They pass from mind to mind without permission. And right now, that thought travels with your name attached. You didn't ask for followers. You didn't declare yourself a leader. You didn't advertise a philosophy or sell an ideology. You simply existed in a way that contradicted their version of reality. Sometimes existence alone is rebellion. Sometimes presence alone is power. And now, those who sat comfortably atop their thrones are realizing the truth. They may control the world's resources, but they do not control its imagination. You've captured that. You've become the story people tell when they're tired of being told who to be. You've become the icon whispered by dreamers, the reference point for the restless, the blueprint for the ones who never fit inside their boxes. The alert is the elite's attempt to erase their own insecurity. But insecurity doesn't disappear. It grows teeth. It grows echoes. It grows rumors that make the walls of power tremble. You didn't break the system. You revealed its cracks. Cracks that were already there, deep, spreading, ignored. And when light touches cracks, they widen. That's what your influence does. It illuminates, it exposes, it forces truth into places that depended on shadows to survive. So they call their advisors. They call their lobbyists. They call their publicists. They call their government contacts. They try to shape the storm. But the storm is not yours. The storm is theirs. You didn't create it, you revealed it. They fear that more people will see what you saw, that power is not monolithic, that authority is not divine, that empires can tremble, that influence does not require permission. And that fear turns their discussions into arguments, their confidence into doubt, their composure into performance. Behind closed doors, they debate the meaning of your rise. Some say you're a phase, some say you're a threat, some say you're a message they don't understand, but all of them agree on one thing: they cannot ignore you. And being unable to ignore someone is the first stage of losing control to them. Your rise is not loud, it is not violent, it is not destructive. Your rise is gravitational. A pull that grows stronger the more they resist it. They try to push back, but pushback only makes gravity more noticeable. Their panic is an orbit, their fear is a rotation, their attention is involuntary. You've become their center of gravity without ever attempting to be. That's why the alert feels different from the others they've written. It feels heavier, it feels uncertain. It feels like the language of people who are used to winning but suddenly don't know what game they're playing. They track your influence like a meteor they didn't see coming. They ask themselves what collision might look like, but the collision has already happened, not in the world, but in their minds. Their perception fractured, their narrative cracked, their sense of invincibility dissolved. You didn't do this. Their fear did. You simply existed, and existence was enough. Your rise is not the threat. Their reaction is. If the world feels tense, it's because they made tension a shield. If the world feels shaken, it's because they mistook control for stability. If the world feels uncertain, it's because certainty was their illusion, not your disruption. And now, in every meeting they hold, every alert they issue, every whisper they circulate, they reveal a truth they cannot escape. The old world is slipping, and it is slipping through your shadow. You are not their downfall. You are the mirror reflecting it. Their fear of you is proof that the world is changing, not because of action, but because of awareness. And awareness is irreversible. The elite want to know your next move. But your next move doesn't need to be made. It has already begun. Because what they don't understand, what they can't possibly understand, is that your next move isn't a step. It's a shift. A shift in perception, in culture, in momentum. A shift so subtle it doesn't look like movement at all, yet it rearranges the entire landscape beneath their feet. You don't need to march, you don't need to announce, you don't need to strike. Your silence is the move. Your presence is the move. Your unpredictability is the move. And every time they try to anticipate you, they reveal how deeply you've infiltrated their thoughts. That's the secret terror they're drowning in. They're no longer responding to events, they're responding to possibilities. The possibility of you. You've become the variable they can't calculate, the answer they can't solve, the outcome they can't forecast. Their panic is no longer about what you did, it's about what you represent. You represent the collapse of certainty. You represent the rise of autonomy. You represent the idea that power is no longer confined to the few. It has shifted into anyone bold enough to think beyond permission. That's why the alert will haunt them, not you. It is a monument to their fear, a file stamped with their confession. We don't know how to control this one. And once that sentence exists, even in whispers, the old order begins to deteriorate. Not because you attacked it, but because it relied on the illusion that no one could stand outside its rules. You stand outside effortlessly. That's what kills them. That's what unravels their certainty thread by thread. People see their panic. People see their doubt. People see their fear of you, and they draw their own conclusions. You didn't ask to become a symbol, but symbols choose themselves. And Now your name travels through conversations like electricity felt before it's understood, respected before it's defined. You've become the question that rewrites every answer, the presence that reshapes every room. The idea that refuses to be categorized or contained. They wanted to label you. Instead, they legitimized you. They wanted to control you. Instead, they confirmed you cannot be controlled. They wanted to diminish you. Instead, they magnified you. Your rise is not a rebellion, it's a recalibration, a realignment of where influence truly comes from, a reminder that power is not inherited, it is perceived, and perception has shifted permanently in your direction. So let them panic, let them monitor, let them whisper, let them analyze, because the more they try to understand you, the more they prove that you've already won. Your next move isn't coming. Your next move is already alive in their fear. Turn off the lights and listen closely. There's a pulse underneath everything tonight, a quiet thunder humming beneath the surface of your thoughts. You feel it, don't you? That subtle tightening in the air, that shift in the atmosphere that makes your skin prickle like someone just whispered a secret directly into your bloodstream. The world is behaving strangely, almost as if something invisible tilted its axis just a few degrees, and deep inside, you already know the truth. That tilt has everything to do with you, because somewhere in the high towers of influence, behind closed doors and frosted glass, a symbolic number has been stamped onto your existence. 50 million. Not in currency, no. Money is too small a vessel to carry what you represent. It's a valuation, a measurement, a desperate attempt to quantify what they cannot control. They call it a bounty because they lack the vocabulary to describe the panic you've ignited. But you and I both know it's not a target. It's a confession. The world doesn't place a symbolic 50 million price tag on silence. It places it on disruptions, on anomalies, on forces so unpredictable that institutions can feel their old blueprints dissolving just by whispering your name. And whisper it they do, not out of admiration, out of necessity, out of fear, out of fascination, out of that deep, instinctive recognition that you've stepped out of the predictable linear script they wrote for you. You've done something far more destabilizing than breaking rules. You've exposed them. You didn't challenge the hierarchy with fists or fire. You challenged it with your existence, your unpredictability, your refusal to shrink yourself into a box with a neat label. And that alone has shaken their order more violently than any rebellion could. Picture it, a room full of analysts, experts, strategists, advisors, people who made careers pretending they understand everything hunched over glowing screens, replaying your movements like they're decoding encrypted transmissions. They analyze your silences, your pauses, the way your eyes shift, the rhythm of your breathing. They don't study you because you're dangerous. They study you because you're unclassifiable, and nothing terrifies a system more than something it can't categorize. They write reports layered with jargon, graphs, psychological theories, and still they can't predict your next step. That unpredictability is your rebellion. That unknowability is your revolution. Meanwhile, the critics sharpen their tongues like symbolic blades. They disguise themselves as commentators, skeptics, opportunists, each trying to capture you through narrative, through opinion, through distortion. They think if they can define you, they can contain you. If they can label you, they can limit you. If they can criticize you loud enough, they can drown you out. But every attempt to hold you still only makes your shadow stretch wider. Because you don't fight them, you don't argue, you don't defend. And that silence, your silence, is the greatest psychological strike they've ever suffered. To them, your silence is not emptiness, it's resistance, it's defiance. It's evidence that their frameworks, their rules, their logic are flimsy when confronted by someone who doesn't play the game they designed, so they escalate. They amplify the symbolic bounty to 50 million, hoping someone, somewhere, can capture you. But who are these hunters they're calling? Not assassins in the literal sense, no. In this psychological battlefield, hunters are the opinion chasers, the gossip spreaders, the narrative manipulators, the opportunists who salivate at the chance to exploit your rising myth. They come at you through microphones, through comments, through headlines, through half-truths, through artificial narratives crafted in panic rooms. They aim not to harm you physically, but to pin you down with interpretations, to reduce your complexity to a headline, to shrink your presence into a trope. But every time they try to dissect you, they cut themselves instead. Because in their desperation to expose you, they expose their own motives, envy, insecurity, obsession, fear. They reveal how threatened they are by anyone who refuses to live as a predictable footnote. And while they scramble, the people whisper. Whispers turn to conversations. Conversations turn to debates. Debates turn to fascination. Your name becomes a cultural tremor that shakes across cities, families, social circles. Some admire you, some resent you, some try to imitate you. But all of them, every last one, feels the vibration of your presence humming under the surface of their day. It spreads like resonance, a sound that wasn't supposed to echo this far, but refuses to stop traveling. The media catches on. They magnify you. They twist you. They glorify you. They distort you. They argue about you with such intensity that it becomes obvious they're not trying to understand you, they're trying to survive you. Because the moment a person becomes too influential to ignore, the world rearranges itself around them. And that is what you've done. You've become rearrangement. You've become cultural gravity. You've become the tremor beneath their narratives. You've become the shadow they can't outrun. And the symbolic 50 million? That number is less about your worth and more about their fear. It's the world's way of admitting, we cannot contain this, we cannot predict this, we cannot control this. They think the number defines you, they don't realize it defines them. Because what kind of system slaps a 50 million symbolic value on a person just for existing outside the script? A system on the edge, a system terrified of collapse, a system painfully aware that one unpredictable individual is enough to expose decades of illusion. And every time someone tries to capture your essence, whether through criticism, imitation, manipulation, or intellectual deconstruction, they fail. And their failure becomes another chapter in your myth. That's why your reputation has grown beyond your own actions. It has become self-sustaining. You don't spread yourself, they spread you. Every attempt to minimize you becomes an advertisement. Every attempt to contain you becomes momentum. Every attempt to silence you becomes a megaphone. You've become the idea they can't bury, the question they can't answer, the variable they can't solve, the mirror they can't face. And here's the most poetic part. You didn't choose this. You didn't crown yourself. You didn't ask for the symbolic bounty. It was placed on you because the world needed a symbol for everything it fears and everything it envies. You became the storm, not by force, but by existence. You became the tremor, not by destruction, but by resonance. You became the myth, not by effort, but by inevitability. And now the number grows louder. 50 million, 50 million, 50 million. A chant wrapped in desperation. A confession disguised as a warning. A declaration that the world has identified the one thing it cannot control and is begging anyone to define it, categorize it, neutralize it. But you cannot be defined. You cannot be categorized. You cannot be neutralized. You are beyond their language. You are beyond their predictions. You are beyond their systems. And that is why the narrator, this voice that sees through the walls of reality, leans in now, whispering the truth that the world refuses to admit out loud. The 50 million isn't a threat, it's proof. Proof that you've crossed the threshold where influence becomes inevitability. Proof that your presence is too large for the old world to swallow. Proof that the systems built on hierarchy, obedience, and predictability quiver when confronted by someone who doesn't bow to them. You've become the myth they cannot erase, a symbol they cannot silence, an echo they cannot outrun. And the 50 million? It's simply the world's way of saying, we see you, we fear you, we cannot define you, we cannot stop you. You are no longer a name, you are the tremor beneath their certainty. You are the resonance in their silence. You are the myth they will spend eternity trying and failing to contain. You feel it, don't you? That quiet shift in the world's posture once your name slipped beyond containment and started circulating like a rumored prophecy. They wanted the story to end at that truth, to freeze the narrative before it grew any sharper, any louder, any more undeniable. But narratives like yours do not stop on command. They metastasize. They seep into new corners. They grow teeth in the dark. And the moment you cross that invisible threshold from person to phenomenon, the world found itself reorganizing around you without your permission, because the truth they cannot bury always grows roots, and those roots have already begun cracking through their marble floors. You might think the 50 million pinned onto your existence was meant as a threat, some theatrical declaration of resistance from the systems that once claimed dominance. But you know better. You can feel the tremor beneath the surface, the kind that doesn't shake buildings, but shakes beliefs, the kind that doesn't topple governments, but topples illusions, the kind that doesn't break bones, but breaks narratives. This isn't a number, it's an admission, a confession, a nervous handshake between crumbling institutions saying, we've lost control of the story. Because a story like yours doesn't stay still. It doesn't sit politely in the corner waiting to be interpreted. It spreads across airwaves and dinner tables and sleepless nights. It infects the minds of those who once thought they were untouchable. It forces a planet built on old frameworks to adjust itself or risk collapsing under its own outdated architecture. And so, the bounty, as they call it, isn't a hunt. It's a coping mechanism, a desperate attempt to make sense of something they can no longer categorize, no longer predict, no longer file neatly into a system that was already cracking long before you stepped into the spotlight. They call it a price. But it's a mirror. It reflects their fear, not your danger. It reflects their instability, not your threat. Because you didn't destroy anything. You revealed what was already broken. You didn't dethrone anyone. You exposed the throne for its hollowness. You didn't command the world's attention. Its attention drifted toward you because everything else felt too small, too fragile, too predictable to matter anymore, and that's what terrifies them the most. Not your presence, but the absence you create in everything else. The way their old gods, old leaders, old structures start to look flimsy when compared to the gravity you now carry. The way their traditions feel outdated next to the myth you've become. The way their institutions whisper about you like a storm they can hear on the horizon but cannot measure with their instruments. Because storms are predictable, you are not. And predictability is the only currency they ever truly trusted. So now they scramble, but their scrambling only feeds the myth. Analysts dissect your interviews, your pauses, your silences, your choices not to respond. Commentators turn your expressions into theories. Experts build entire careers trying to decode you, failing publicly but pretending they're making progress. Critics sharpen their opinions, not realizing their criticisms only enlarge your silhouette. Followers multiply because the world loves what it cannot define. Doubters multiply because doubt is their last shield against awe. And through all of it, your name becomes a current, a tide, a gravitational pull, dragging the globe into a new psychological alignment. This is the part they didn't anticipate. The myth grows whether you speak or stay silent. Silence acts like gasoline. Every absence becomes presence. Every rumor becomes scripture. Every misunderstanding becomes momentum. And while they cling to their fragile frameworks, something even more dangerous yet entirely symbolic begins to unfold. People start reimagining themselves through you. They start questioning the structures that once held them in place. They start wondering why your rise felt inevitable and theirs felt impossible. They start reshaping their worldview around the idea that boundaries are illusions and influence doesn't need permission. You didn't ask to become their symbol, but symbols don't need consent. They emerge. They evolve. They anchor themselves in the subconscious of a species searching for meaning. And you unwillingly, unknowingly, unintentionally became one. This is why the 50 million is more than a number. It is a social earthquake, a psychological artifact, a cultural confession. The world is saying, loudly and publicly, we cannot contain what you've become. And that admission alone destabilizes everything built on the fantasy of control. Watch how they react now. Influencers try to mimic your cadence, hoping to bottle the phenomenon. They can't. Your cadence wasn't learned, it was forged. Politicians try to reframe your ascent as a cautionary tale, but their voices crack under the weight of their trembling narratives. Corporations scramble to avoid your name on their stock reports because every mention causes unpredictable shifts. Journalists obsessively track trends tied to your identity, terrified they'll miss the next cultural aftershock. Families argue at kitchen tables, trying to interpret you, projecting their own fears and desires into the same obsessively tracked trends, your silhouette. Youth copy you not because they understand you, but because they feel the tremor of your myth and want to align themselves with the frequency of inevitability. And inevitability, that's the word they fear the most. Systems can fight threats, they can censor rebellion, they can suppress dissent, but inevitability, that is untouchable. Because inevitability isn't an action, it's a narrative, a collective belief, a cultural instinct that whispers, this can't be stopped. You became that whisper. And now institutions scramble, acting like symbolic hunters, not with weapons, but with think pieces, psychological profiles, strategic briefings, public campaigns, rebranding attempts, emergency meetings, panels of experts debating your influence, each one believing they're closing in on you, when in reality, they're just orbiting your gravity. The more they study you, the more mysterious you become. The more they analyze you, the more unpredictable you appear. The more they try to simplify you, the more complex your shadow grows. Every attempt to capture your meaning only expands it. And slowly, something else begins to dawn on them quietly at first. Then all at once, like an inconvenient sunrise, they realize they never placed a bounty on your head. They placed a bounty on their fear, because fear needs a target. Fear needs a symbol. Fear needs a shape it can blame for shaking the walls. And in naming you, they inadvertently crowned you. This is how myths are born. Not from greatness, from panic. Not from heroism, from destabilized systems searching for an explanation. Not from effort, from the desperate attempt to control a narrative slipping through trembling fingers. And now, look at what has happened. Your name has become a quiet rebellion woven into the fabric of global conversation. Your reputation has become a compass, pointing to everything they tried to bury under silence. Your influence has become a mirror, forcing the world to confront the gaps in its own identity. You are not dangerous, you're inconvenient. You're the proof that the old rules don't work anymore. And the old world hates being proven obsolete. This is why the 50 million hangs in the air like an omen, not because it threatens you, but because it exposes them. It exposes their fear of losing control. It exposes their inability to define you. It exposes their wish that your rise was an exception instead of a prophecy. Because if you can slip through the cracks, others might follow. If you can rewrite the narrative, others might dare to do the same. If you can become a phenomenon, others might realize they don't have to stay invisible. Your myth is contagious, and they know it. That's the real reason behind the price tag. It's not a hunt, it's a warning to others. Don't become like you. But warnings only work when people are afraid, and right. Now, they're not afraid of becoming you. They're afraid of being left behind by you. The institutions tremble, the systems creak, the power holders whisper. The old world shivers under the weight of your name. Because they finally understand what part one ended with. You are a truth they can't bury, and now that truth is spreading. And now the world reaches the point they feared most, the moment where the whispers about you stop being whispers and start becoming scripture. Because once a truth spreads far enough, once a name echoes long enough, once a myth anchors deep enough, it stops belonging to the systems that tried to contain it and begins belonging to the people who carry it. You can feel that shift, can't you? That quiet surrender in the air. That reluctant respect slipping into their tone when they mention you. That uneasy fascination in the way they watch, study, imitate, repeat. They still pretend they're in control of the narrative, of perception, of the story being written around you. But control is a fragile illusion, and illusions cannot survive the weight of inevitability. The world doesn't move toward you anymore. It orbits you, and orbit is not loyalty. Orbit is gravity. Orbit is acknowledgement. Orbit is proof that your presence has become a center point in a system that once denied you even a corner. The so-called 50 million price has now evolved past meaning. It's no longer a symbolic bounty. It's a badge on the chest of the world, their confession that they failed to categorize you, failed to predict you, failed to silence the ripple effect your identity triggered. Because what they called a price became a spotlight. What they imagined as suppression became amplification. What they framed as a warning became a declaration of cultural momentum. And momentum never stops for the comfort of those who fear it. You didn't choose to become the phenomenon they chase, but the phenomenon chose you the moment the world realized your existence wasn't aligned with their old equations. Your unpredictability became a language. Your insight became a map. Your refusal to bend became a signal fire for everyone who once lived inside boundaries they never questioned. And that's the part they cannot admit. You shook the foundation not by shouting, not by forcing, not by breaking anything, but simply by being the one thing their frameworks weren't built to handle. Unrestricted potential. They talk about you in boardrooms now. They whisper your name in classrooms. They analyze your influence in psychological studies. Some admire you, some hate you. Most don't know what to feel, and that emotional confusion is exactly why your myth thrives. Because myths are born from the world's inability to define something it cannot ignore, and that's the stage you've reached. You're no longer a threat. You're a reference point, a standard, a cultural pulse, a gravitational center the world unconsciously calibrates itself around. Every commentator dissecting you becomes part of your chorus. Every critic arguing against you becomes an amplifier for your signal. Every rumor mutating your story becomes another branch in the mythology the world is writing around your silhouette. And now, the final truth settles over them like dusk. The price was never meant to diminish you. It was meant to comfort them. A way to tell themselves, we still have agency, we can still define him, we can still contain what he is becoming. But they can't, because you're no longer becoming. You are a symbol of unfiltered influence, a disruption they can't reverse, a phenomenon they can't control, a myth they can't rewrite, and myths, once awakened, do not return to sleep. So remember this as the world continues to spin with your name stitched into its rhythm. The 50 million wasn't a threat, it was a surrender, a public admission from crumbling systems that your reputation has grown beyond their reach, beyond their comprehension, beyond their ability to silence. You are not being hunted, you are being recognized. And recognition once earned on this scale becomes the one thing even time struggles to erase. You wanted truth, you became it. You wanted clarity, you embodied it. You wanted a voice. You evolved into an echo the world cannot unhear, and now your legacy marches forward, not as a warning, not as a rebellion, but as a permanent fixture in the world's psychological landscape, a myth with a pulse. A phenomenon with a name, a truth no institution can bury and no era can forget.
Welcome back, Wanderer. Step inside, because tonight we're talking about the moment everything around you finally snapped into clarity. You didn't ask for respect, they just realized you deserve it. And the wild part? It didn't happen when you were trying. It didn't happen when you were performing. It didn't happen when you were bending yourself to fit other people's expectations. It happened when you stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped proving yourself, when you stopped chasing understanding from people who were never meant to understand you in the first place. Respect came the moment you started moving, like someone who already had it. People always expect respect to arrive with noise. With speeches, declarations, demands, confrontations. They think respect appears when someone forces the world to acknowledge them. But that's not how real respect works. Real respect arrives silently, gradually, inevitably, like a sunrise nobody can stop. And that's what's happening with you. For the longest time, they misunderstood your quiet. They mistook your patience for softness. They mistook your humility for uncertainty. They mistook your kindness for naivety. They mistook your calmness for weakness. But now, that misunderstanding is collapsing, because they finally see what your silence was protecting. Your self-control, your discipline, your emotional intelligence, your raw depth. You didn't ask to be respected. Your character demanded it. You didn't raise your voice, but your presence rose. You didn't chase validation, but your value got louder. You didn't perform for the crowd, but somehow the crowd started paying attention. Respect found you because you became someone impossible to ignore. People don't respect you because you bragged. They respect you because you endured. They respect you because you grew. They respect you because you didn't let bitterness change your nature. They respect you because you outlasted storms that broke louder people than you. And somewhere along the way, without warning, without announcement, without spectacle, they looked at you and realized, this one is different. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It wasn't a movie scene. It was a slow accumulation of truths they couldn't deny anymore. Truth number one, you're stable in a world of volatility. People shake easily, you don't. And that makes them rethink your entire blueprint. truth, or two, you don't react impulsively. You respond with intention, and that scares people who rely on emotional manipulation. Truth number 3, you have clarity that others only pretend to have. The kind of clarity that comes from knowing yourself, not from performing for others. Truth number 4, you don't crumble under pressure. You refine, you evolve, you become sharper. Truth number 5, you don't fold when you're misunderstood. You stay aligned with your truth, even when no one is clapping. And here's the biggest truth of all. You stopped being impressed by the people who once thought they were above you. That's when the shift happened. People only disrespect those they believe need them. The moment you stopped needing them, the moment you stopped asking for their approval, the moment you started walking in the direction of your own growth, everything changed. Because now they're seeing you through a different lens. A lens of realization, not assumption. They realized you're not fragile. You're focused. You're not timid. You're intentional. You're not lost. You're evolving. You're not beneath them. You're simply beyond their understanding. And that realization humbles people quickly. You didn't talk your way into respect. Your vibration earned it. It's the way you don't beg for attention. It's the way you don't collapse under judgment. It's the way you maintain your dignity, even when things are falling apart. It's the way you rebuild yourself quietly. It's the way you grow without announcing your growth. That's the kind of energy people respect, even if they don't like you. Because deep down, they know it takes strength to stay soft in a world that tried to harden you. And it takes power to stay silent in moments when everyone wants you reactive. Respect isn't given to loudness, it's given to alignment. And that's what your journey has become, a consistent demonstration of alignment. You don't explode, you don't crumble, you don't cling, you don't collapse, you don't beg for clarity, you create it. You don't chase people, you choose them. You became the type of person people second guess before they approach. The type they think twice before disrespecting. The type whose absence feels louder than other people's presence. You didn't ask for that. Your energy carved it out for you. People started respecting you the moment they realized you don't break easily. And you don't break for anyone. But the respect you're getting now? It's deeper than admiration. It's recognition. Recognition of your resilience. Recognition of your authenticity. Recognition of your evolution. Recognition of how much you've endured without letting it turn you bitter or cold. Recognition of how you carried yourself when no one was watching. Recognition of the fact that you didn't shortcut your growth. You earned every inch of it. And people feel that. People feel the aura of someone who refined themselves without victimhood. Someone who healed without seeking sympathy. Someone who rose without stepping on anyone. Someone who learned without needing an audience. Someone who carries wisdom instead of wounds. That's what makes people respect you now. Not your status, not your accomplishments, not your achievements, your frequency. Your silence used to confuse them, but now it impresses them. Your boundaries used to be misunderstood. Now they're admired. Your distance used to be misinterpreted. Now it's respected. Your growth used to be unseen. Now it's undeniable. And somewhere along the timeline, the people who once spoke loosely about you stopped speaking at all. Not because they fear consequences, but because they recognize your worth now. Because they understand they misjudged you. Because they feel uncomfortable realizing they treated someone significant like someone small. Respect doesn't come when you demand it. It comes when people look at you and realize they have no choice but to give it. Your energy has reached that level. You're no longer someone people can dismiss. You're no longer someone people can talk down to. You're no longer someone people can undervalue. You're no longer someone people can categorize easily. You became too layered, too grounded, too aware, too intentional, too elevated. And here's the deepest part. People now respect you because they know you respect yourself. You don't shrink. You don't apologize for existing. You don't dilute your presence. You don't justify your boundaries. You don't tolerate energy that drains you. You don't explain your healing. You don't negotiate your worth. People can feel that self-respect radiating off you. And self-respect is contagious. It makes people treat you differently instantly. Because self-respect is the highest form of energy, and you carry it like armor. You didn't ask for it. You didn't beg for it. You didn't force it. You became it. Respect follows those who respect themselves. And you, without realizing it, built a version of yourself that commands respect without ever needing to raise your voice. You are becoming a force in your own narrative. Not because you demanded recognition, but because you evolved into someone who deserves it. Everyone feels it now. This is your era of natural respect, the kind that doesn't need permission, the kind that doesn't need approval, the kind that doesn't need validation. Respect earned through evolution is respect no one can take away. But the truth is, the respect you're receiving now didn't appear suddenly. It built itself slowly, quietly, invisibly, accumulating through every moment people thought you weren't being watched. Because respect isn't born in grand gestures. It's born in the small, microscopic decisions that reveal who a person truly is. And you were consistent in ways most people aren't. You didn't fold when your name was dragged through misunderstanding. You didn't lash out when people chose doubt over curiosity. You didn't become bitter when the world gave you reasons to harden. You didn't abandon your values just to fit in. You didn't shrink to make others more comfortable. You didn't turn arrogant when life broke open possibilities for you. You remained you, even when you wasn't the easy thing to be. People don't respect consistency right away. They respect it eventually, when their own instability exposes the gap between who they pretend to be and who you actually are. That's what's happening now. People are looking at you, and they're realizing you were the one who stayed solid. You didn't need crowds to validate you. You didn't need applause to continue. You didn't need attention to evolve. You didn't need approval to keep going. And that terrifies people who depend on those things for their identity. They see that you're guided by something internal, something they can't manipulate or weaken, and that commands respect on a level most people don't know how to process. Because true respect is rooted in mystery, not the kind of mystery that hides weakness, the kind that hides strength. You became hard to read, not because you were pretending, but because you outgrew the language people used to define you. They can't interpret your silence anymore. They can't predict your choices. They can't tell what phase you're in. They can't tell what bothers you and what doesn't. They can't tell what you're planning. They can't tell how much you know. And when people can't read you, they adjust to you. That adjustment is respect, not the performative kind, not the dramatic kind. The involuntary kind, the kind that comes from the nervous system, not the mind. Because the nervous system knows when someone is aligned. And your alignment is louder than your voice. People feel it before they understand it. They sense it before they acknowledge it. They react to it before they realize why. They don't know what you're doing differently. They just know something in you is calibrated in a way they can't ignore. And here's what's ironic. Respect usually comes from achievement, money, status, titles, recognition. But you're being respected for something deeper. Your ability to remain yourself under pressure. People watched you go through things that should have broken you. And every time, instead of collapsing, you became more refined. Not harder, just clearer. Not colder, just more selective. Not arrogant, just deeply self-aware. They saw you evolve without announcing your evolution. They saw you heal without turning healing into an identity. They saw you grow without taunting those who stayed behind. They saw you rise without creating enemies. And that is rare. People respect rarity. The world is full of people who dramatize every emotion, every problem, every lesson. But you did the opposite. You internalized, processed, understood, transformed. People respect the ones who don't crumble when the spotlight isn't on them. And that's why respect found you. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. Respect follows self-control. Respect follows self-awareness. Respect follows self-respect. Respect follows emotional mastery. And you've been mastering yourself quietly for a long time. But the moment it became visible, that's when everything shifted. People who once underestimated you now pause before they speak. People who once dismissed your ideas now listen more carefully. People who once talked over you now choose their words with caution. People who once treated you casually now act like every interaction matters. They're not doing this because you changed your attitude. They're doing it because they can feel the upgrade in your energy. It's in the way you carry yourself. Calm, grounded, controlled. It's in the way your presence doesn't stretch itself out trying to fill space. It simply exists, and that's enough to shift the entire room. People respect the ones who don't force themselves to be seen, because anyone can be loud. Anyone can demand space. Anyone can perform confidence, but only a rare few can walk in with quiet certainty and let their energy speak first. You're one of those few, and everyone around you is finally noticing. They're noticing that you don't argue, you don't plead, you don't beg, you don't over-explain, you don't overshare, you don't chase closeness, you don't seek validation, you don't try to be impressive, you simply are. You show up authentically, you operate clearly, you maintain your peace, you follow your intuition, you trust your path, you accept your own evolution. People respect people who trust themselves, because most people don't. Your self-trust makes them pay attention. Your self-respect makes them reevaluate their own choices. Your energy makes them question their assumptions. And that is why the respect around you feels different now. It's not shallow, it's not polite, it's not forced. It's earned. Earned through evolution. Earned through patience. Earned through discipline. Earned through the nights you kept going without applause. Earned through the days you chose growth over ego. Earned through the moments you refused to betray your character. People respect the ones who don't lose themselves on the way to becoming themselves. You didn't lose yourself. You found yourself. And now the world is adjusting. They're giving you space they once withheld. They're offering you silence they once filled with doubt. They're meeting you with care they once denied. They're recognizing a strength they overlooked for far too long. And the most poetic part? You didn't do anything to get their respect. You simply stopped doing anything that made you disrespect yourself. The moment you honored your own energy, the world mirrored it back. You didn't ask for respect. You aligned with it. And alignment always wins. And now we arrive at the part no one ever warns you about. The moment when respect finally shows up, not because you demanded it, not because you fought for it, but because people could no longer deny who you've become. It's a strange moment, almost surreal, because it doesn't feel dramatic or loud. It feels quiet, clean, almost holy. Like the world finally adjusted itself to the frequency you've been carrying all along. Respect came slow, and then, all at once. It began with the smallest changes. The way people paused before speaking to you. The way their tone softened. The way they waited for your reaction instead of assuming it. And at first, you didn't even notice it. You thought people were just having a good day. Or maybe you were imagining the shift. But it kept happening. Over and over. Until one day, it hit you. People weren't treating you the same anymore. They were treating you better. Not because you became someone new, but because they finally started seeing the version of you that had been there the entire time. You didn't ask for respect. The truth of who you are demanded it. And people feel that difference. They feel it when your eyes meet theirs with calmness instead of insecurity. They feel it when your silence carries clarity instead of confusion. They feel it when your presence settles the room instead of shrinking inside it. They feel it when your energy stands firm without trying to dominate anyone. People respect the ones who don't perform themselves into exhaustion. People respect the ones who don't betray their own values. People respect the ones who move with intention instead of chaos. And that's you now. Someone who's moved out of survival mode and into self-mastery. The respect you're receiving now didn't come from what you gained. It came from what you refused to lose. You didn't lose your softness. You didn't lose your empathy. You didn't lose your patience. You didn't lose your dignity. You didn't lose your compassion. You didn't lose your honesty. All qualities that are rare. All qualities that are valuable. All qualities that people try to buy, but can only earn through healing. You earned your respect by walking through fire without letting it burn the best parts of you. And when people see someone who stayed kind in a world that rewards cruelty, someone who stayed grounded in a world obsessed with chaos, someone who stayed real in a world built on pretending, they can't help but respect that. Not everyone will admit it. Not everyone will say it out loud. But respect is not in the words. It's in the behavior. And their behavior has already changed. The same people who once doubted you now lower their ego before approaching you. The same people who once talked freely about you now choose their words like they're walking across sacred ground. The same people who dismissed your thoughts now listen with careful attention. The same people who underestimated you now feel uneasy standing too close because they know you see right through them. That's the thing about respect. It makes people honest. It makes them cautious. It makes them aware. And if you pay attention, you'll notice something else too. People now take your presence seriously. They don't interrupt you the way they used to. They don't rush you the way they used to. They don't challenge you the way they used to. They don't speak over you the way they used to. Because self-respect radiates outwards. It becomes a boundary without needing to be spoken. It becomes a standard without needing to be reinforced. It becomes a message without needing to be explained. You carry yourself differently now, not in an arrogant way, not in a defensive way, but in a way that says, I know who I am, and I don't need anyone to confirm it. People respect that deeply, because most people don't know who they are. Most people shape themselves around approval. Most people crumble under judgment. Most people drown in their own self-doubt. But not you, not anymore. You rebuilt yourself internally. You grounded yourself emotionally. You aligned yourself spiritually. You strengthened yourself mentally. You refined yourself quietly. And now your energy walks into the room before you do, and people adjust to it. This is the part of the journey where your presence becomes a statement, where your silence becomes authority, where your boundaries become unshakable, where your identity becomes undeniable. This is the part where people who once ignored you now watch you with respect, not because they suddenly became wiser, but because your evolution forced them to see what they refused to acknowledge before. Respect didn't come to you. It rose from you. You didn't demand it. You grew into someone who naturally commands it. And now, the world has no choice but to recognize what your spirit has known for a long time. You weren't waiting for respect. You were becoming someone worthy of it. And now that you are, everyone can feel it. This is your era of unrequested, undeniable respect. Respect rooted in truth. Respect rooted in alignment. Respect rooted in who you chose to become. And the beautiful part, no one can take away respect you never needed permission to own.